Good evening and welcome. I'd like to welcome not only our Long Meadow residents, but I understand we have guests from other communities as well. This should be an interesting evening. My entire administrative team is here. They'll be participating in the forum in a little bit. We're going to have an exciting agenda for you. I hope you find it exciting. We're going to go through the history of why some of these reforms are going on, how Massachusetts students are doing educationally, what is the Common Core, what is PARCC, what's happening right now in Long Meadow, and we'll have each of the principals talk about the elementary schools, middle schools, and high school. And then we'll have questions and answers from Long Meadow's residents and a feedback sheet also for Long Meadow residents. So I'm going to open by talking a little bit about the history. I started teaching in 1978, a long time ago, and it was interesting to be a teacher who's actually been in the trenches as education has changed over the past 35 years. When I started teaching, I was in Lowell, an inner city school. There was no continuity in curriculum. As a new teacher, I was told to do what I wanted with the kids. I was at the mercy of the teachers who were in the hallway with me to share information and curriculum. Whether or not we had books, some classes had absolutely no books. We were scrambling with those old blue dittos that we had to roll out. We had no expectations for kids to excel. Out of a class, I taught 5th and 6th grade self-contained. Out of a class of 32 kids, one made it through high school, one. And she was one of the slower kids in the class. The rates of kids going to prison, the rates of kids that were pregnant were through the roof, and we were doing nothing about it. I then moved to Belmont after 3 years, one of the top districts in the state. I was one of 10 6th grade teachers where, again, I found out there was no continuity in the curriculum. But another thing I discovered is that the Belmont students were 2 academic years ahead of my average and best students in Lowell. There was a 2-year gap between a city school and a suburban school. But we were struggling also in Belmont because we taught what we wanted. With 10 6th grade teachers, not one of us taught the same social studies curriculum. Math, they had the NCTM, National Councils of Teachers of Mathematics. That was a little bit better because they had put out standards. As for the other subject areas, people did exactly what they wanted. In 1983, under Ronald Reagan, A Nation at Risk came out. It was a publication talking about how the United States of America was in great jeopardy because our educational system was failing. People really stood up and paid attention because there was something that really we were afraid of because global competition was becoming more prevalent and were our school systems going to hold up? After that, Massachusetts got into the Education Reform Act of 1993. At that time, they brought together teachers, politicians, business people, and they started educational reform in the state. We were a leading force in education and have been since the early 1990s through the current day. With educational reform, we created frameworks. It took over a 10-year period to get them in all subject areas, but we did. It suddenly became the expectation that every 6th grade teacher in the state of Massachusetts held the same standards for kids. We finally knew what was expected for students to know and learn, whether they were in Lowell, or they were in Belmont, or they were in Long Meadow. That was really a major step forward for all of education. After that, an offshoot of that now is what's happening with the Common Core, and we'll get into that next. Let's start off, though, with how Massachusetts students are doing, because a lot of what we're hearing in the scuttlebutt is that our kids are not competing nationally. Our kids are not prepared for the workforce. That is so far distant from the truth that I hope that we can put out that misnomer tonight. Our students excel, and Long Meadow, being one of the top schools in Massachusetts, being one of the top performers in the world, your kids are getting a great education. Here's the proof. This is from the New York Times on September 2nd, 2013. If Massachusetts were a country, its 8th graders would rank 2nd in the world in science, behind only Singapore, according to the TIMSS. TIMSS is an international test, trends in mathematics and science, that's given to 63 nations. There were more than 600,000 students taking it, and we ranked 2nd in the world. Our 8th graders also did well in math, coming in 6th in the world, behind Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. As the United States as a whole came in 10th in science and 9th in math. When we look at Massachusetts and we disaggregate it, because the TIMSS is usually given nationally, and Massachusetts said, we're going to take it separately, we want to see how we fare. Massachusetts performs so well, we're recognized worldwide as educational leaders. When you look at the United States as well, when we're coming in 9th and 10th, we should be proud of that. When you look at these other countries, what they're not telling you, they've weeded out their kids that struggle. They've weeded kids that are back to the farms, or they're working in factories. They're not allowed to go to a school after a certain point. Countries like China weed them out in elementary school, and that your top high schools are the only ones that are being reported on the TIMSS tests. They're not doing all their provinces, they're not doing all their schools. So whenever you're taking a look at these tests, you have to keep in mind that Massachusetts is representative of all our kids. No matter how much money they have, no matter what their background is, every one of our kids is counted in their showing up for the test. That's not the same playing field in other countries. So when they tell you we're scoring 9th or 10th, that's okay, because all of our kids were tested. But if you take a look at Massachusetts, also, where all of our kids are tested, we're performing very highly. Again, TIMSS is one test, and we're going to talk about the test tonight, but it's not the only indicator of achievement. I think we look to see how successful our kids are going into college. We track kids, what they're doing in the job market. We have many indicators, but this at least gives us some comparison to how we're doing with our neighbor and how we're doing around the world. The PISA is another international test, Program for International Student Assessment. 65 countries are tested in this. The last time it was given 2012. U.S. was close to average in science and reading, and Massachusetts, again, is disaggregated in that. And Massachusetts still performed extremely well. As quoted in Education Week, Massachusetts, long a top-performing U.S. state, demonstrated especially strong performance on the global stage. It scored better than the average for leading industrialized nations in all subjects. Massachusetts scored 527 in reading, outperforming all but 3 educational systems in the world. So when people say, how are we doing? We're doing pretty well. Here's how we ranked, and I have countries in quotes because China disaggregated its data. They had different provinces counted separately, and they did not report all the provinces. I think they tested 12 and only reported on 3. So China counts as 1. We take those scores and put them together. So Massachusetts on PISA, 3rd in reading, 11 scored better than us in math, and 6 countries scored better in science. So what does make a great education before we get into the Common Core? Students need literacy skills. If they have strong literacy skills, they can do anything else. They can do a STEM career. They'll excel in math because they can read the data. They'll be able to succeed on the job market, fill out an application. When we're teaching at school, we want to remember we still value project-based learning. The skill set is important, but we always want to promote higher level thinking. And that's why Massachusetts kids have been so successful since ed reform. Even though the frameworks and Common Core in curriculum gives us standards, what students should know, it's up to the teachers to embed that in really great teaching. The Common Core and the frameworks didn't give lesson plans. It didn't dictate how to form units. It was up to the teachers to do that. We also think a good education involves understanding cultural differences, appreciating the arts, building self-confident, resilient learners, and developing children who are morally sound characters, because they'll be making pretty important decisions as leaders of the free world. So what is the Common Core? You can see it's a result of a long list of things that have been happening in Massachusetts over the past 35 years. The Common Core is standards. It tells us what students should know. What it does is it tries to attempt taking students in K through 12 and giving them a rigorous education that expectations are raised annually. The curriculum is developed by districts, and lesson plans and units of studies are developed by teachers. So why did they develop the Common Core? There were disparities across the states. I told you about the difference between Lowell and Belmont. Let me tell you about the differences between Massachusetts and Mississippi, or Massachusetts and Georgia, or other parts of the country. They're absolutely astronomical. You're hearing a lot of states right now, there's legislation to back out of the Common Core because they're finding it way too rigorous for their kids. The expectations are jumping phenomenally, but keep in mind that the Common Core was based on Massachusetts standards. So for us, it's less of a jump. There's also flexibility to add things to the Common Core should our state wish to do that. It gives a grade-by-grade guide in learning for ELA and math, It's embedded science and social studies into the ELA, which is English Language Arts. Its goal is to prepare all students so that they're ready for college and careers. And they're telling us now that every student needs at least 2 years of technical college in order to have a job that would sustain a family. And we want to ensure that all students have access to an excellent education regardless of their zip code. So who developed the Common Core? The Council of Chief State Officers, Governors Association, teachers, parents, experts in the field, and over 70 educators from the state of Massachusetts. We had a huge voice in developing the Common Core. What's the foundation? We already had the frameworks in existence. We were the foundation. We took the experience of teachers, content people, college professors, states, and leading thinkers, and put them together to come up with the Common Core. We received feedback from the public. Feedback was taken from the NEA, the Teachers Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the National Councils of Teachers of Mathematics, National Councils of Teachers of English, and more. So this was vetted repeatedly through various groups that got to look at it and say, are the Common Core standards realistic, and is this something we should really be shooting for nationally? Here's an example of what standards look like. So if you were to open up the Common Core, which we've run off copies and they're out on the table, so you can have the standards by grade for your children. But this is an example of what a teacher would say. If they open up math and they're doing operations in algebraic thinking, they're asked to use the 4 operations with whole numbers to solve problems, gain familiarity with factors and multiples, generate and analyze patterns. Writing in grade 6. Develop the topic with relevant, well-chosen facts, definitions, concrete details, quotations, or other information and examples. So a teacher would get this and look at either project-based learning or lessons and figure out how they're going to embed this into their reader's workshop, writer's workshop, or a project-based learning experience. The Common Core had purposeful limitations. They did not want to limit how teachers should teach. They believe in the sanctity of teachers developing good units, knowing their students, and making modifications to their lesson plans. It does not include everything that should be taught. In particular, it does not address our advanced learners, nor does it put in modifications for our students that struggle. The full range of ELL is also not addressed in this, as we have an influx into the district, and everyone needs to be college ready. There was a presentation given in New Hampshire, and I want to show you how other states talk about Massachusetts, and this is one of the templates I took right off of their site. And I'll be putting all this PowerPoint online if you want to see the details later. But Massachusetts developed closely working on the Common Core. It reflects our standards, the assessment team, and what they got from the DESE. In 2010, Massachusetts adopted the Common Core, which are now our standards. And critics have urged that mathematics requirements be placed at a level to include Algebra 2, trigonometry, and pre-calculus for all students. New Hampshire agrees that students who are interested in STEM-related college programs and careers should pursue academics to meet these needs. So who adopted the Common Core? 43 states have initially adopted it. 2 states partially adopted it. The District of Columbia and 4 territories have, and the Department of Defense Education Activity. So far, 12 states have introduced legislation to repeal it because they're finding it way too rigorous and they're not able to keep up. I believe Indiana is the only one whose House of Representatives and Senate have actually voted to repeal it at this time. It's not true? How many? Okay. Okay. So here are the states that adopted the Common Core and not adopted. You can see that they're spread out pretty much throughout the country. Okay? And now, frequently asked questions about the Common Core. Do the standards tell teachers how to teach? Does not include curriculum or instructional material. We believe teachers are experts and know best what works in their classrooms. Teachers devise lesson plans. The standards establish what students need to learn, but do not dictate how teachers must teach. And they can be taught in many ways: direct instruction, online learning, small group, whole class. What do the Common Core standards not define? Lesson plans. It does not give science and history standards. There are some that are embedded in ELA, as we said. It does not include advanced work or interventions, and it does not tell us exactly what skills students need to be college and career ready. It does not give us standards for art, music, physical education, health, technology, or other specialized subjects, which the Massachusetts frameworks do. There's another example of third grade ELA. Describe characters in a story and explain how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. Okay. If you took that standard and possibly a teacher would have choice, this is the type of lesson they might do, you could see various teachers who'd be teaching the lesson a different way. One teacher might have them read an article on Martin Luther King from Weekly Reader magazine and use a story grammar marker to map the sequence of events in the article. Another teacher might do a read aloud for the first chapter of the Boxcar Children, ask the students to stop each time a character's actions contribute to a new event in the story. So if Massachusetts is a national leader in education, why adopt the Common Core? We talked about the educational frameworks, and this is just in addition to what's been going on in the state for many years. When do we start using the Common Core? In 2011, over a 2-year period of time. Is the Common Core the same in every state? No, states can customize up to 15% of the standards. And Massachusetts took a blended approach and added more than 20 math standards, as well as several pre-K and ELA standards. Key elements of the Common Core and ELA. They have 4 strands at each grade level. So there's reading, writing, speaking, and language. Emphasis is on college and career readiness. Emphasis is on finding evidence in text and using it to defend answers which require detailed writing. Detailed standards are on writing arguments, explanations, and narratives. Emphasis is on reading and responding to informational text, has increasing text complexity through the grades, and embeds the standards for health, science, and tech areas in the ELA. Features of the ELA Common Core standards: college and career readiness, finding good evidence in text and using it to produce excellent written positions in arguments. Greater emphasis on reading and responding to informational text, increasing text complexity through the grades, and embedding other subject areas. There are differences. You can see that the Common Core is more verbose in what they tell us that we should be doing. And I'll put these online for you to see. I'll read a couple of examples. The frameworks were organized in clusters by grade level, while the Common Core is organized by grade level K to 8 and grouped at 9, 10, and 11, 12. The standards for history, science, and technology were embedded rather than written out. While we focused on the writing process, the Common Core focuses on 3 major purposes for writing: argument, information, narrative. Oral presentations were supposed to be done by memory under the frameworks. Now the focus is on establishing, evaluating, and supporting a point of view. Vocabulary development and structure and origins of modern English. Now we focus on the development of language skills to include the conventions of standard English vocabulary acquisition. In mathematics, we know that it's more rigorous. Our teachers are giving us feedback in terms of aligning the PARCC, because the PARCC has different expectations for math than the way our curriculum is set up. It makes sense of problems and wants students to persevere in solving them. It's abstract and quantitative. They're expected to be able to make viable arguments and critiqued reasoning of others, build models with mathematics, use appropriate tools strategically, attend to precision, look for and make use of structure, look for and express regularity in repeating reasoning. Some of the differences in math. Math quantities, students are supposed to be able to make comparisons up to 10 with numbers and words. Now, when counting objects, they say the number names in the standard order, pairing each object with one and only one number name, and each number name with one and only one object. They were asked to predict the results of putting shapes together and taking them apart. Now they're supposed to compose two-dimensional shapes, rectangles, squares, trapezoids, triangles, half circles, and quarter circles, or three-dimensional shapes, cubes, right rectangular prisms, right circular cones, and right circular cylinders to create a composite shape and compose new shapes from the composite shape. And there are more examples that you can see online. Next, we want to talk about the PARCC, the assessment tool that is linked to the Common Core. Susan Bertrand, our assistant superintendent from Learning, is going to take this piece of it. The administrative team recommended to the school committee that we not participate in PARCC next year for a variety of reasons. The reasons being that the test is not completely vetted, the technology skills need to be aligned with the test, and for various other reasons. But Susan's going to go through what the PARCC is, what expectations are, and then we'll move on to our principal presentations. Susan?
Good evening. I'm not nearly as riveting a speaker as Marie, so this will probably go a little faster. PARCC is a partnership for the assessment of readiness for college and careers. And PARCC is a high-quality assessment linked to the Common Core standards developed by the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. We've already done some trials of PARCC testing in the district this past year, so as Marie said, we opted out for this year for various reasons, but PARCC assessments are computer-based with a paper test option for districts that don't have access to technology. They're a measurement of critical thinking and knowledge application skills, and some of these features overlap with MCAS. They measure performance relative to grade level. They make an academic measure of ELA and math, as the MCAS do. They allow for accommodations for students with special needs, and I believe that PARCC is a little more lenient with those accommodations. You don't necessarily have to be a student identified on the IEP to get an accommodation. The tests are timed, which is different from MCAS. Is PARCC part of the Common Core? No, the two initiatives are separate. PARCC is the assessment that measures whether the students have mastered the concepts and skills outlined in the Common Core. So just as if we were teaching a new unit in math, we would have to make up a new assessment. The new assessment had to come along with the Common Core so that we were measuring what we were teaching. Students are assessed in grades 3 to 11. They're asked to explain and defend answers in math. They're asked to read complex passages and present persuasive arguments with evidence from text. Features of the PARCC is that they monitor whether or not your child is on track for success in college or career. They provide results in a more timely manner than MCAS, at least we're hoping so. They connect to the Common Core standards. They provide comparability among states. Their time, we already talked about that. More rigorous than MCAS, although we don't have a lot of information on that because we didn't get a lot of information back on the test that we took last year. And then PARCC provides online testing options. And here's the big question, is PARCC going to replace MCAS? MASS will pilot PARCC for 2 years and review the results. The Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESE, will then decide if PARCC will replace MCAS. And that's this spring, they'll make that decision. And Longmeadow has opted to administer only the MCAS this year and no PARCC assessments for various reasons. And you can speak to your administrators about that after if you'd like. So this is going to be a little disjointed, but we thought we'd tell you what was happening in Longmeadow. I think Marie's going to take the district happenings. Yep. And then the admins are going to come up and speak to the schools.
Thanks.
Sure.
We wanted to do Common Core and more to make sure that we have a total picture of what's happening in Longmeadow because there is an awful lot going on. And Common Core is only one facet of what's happening. So, in the district, the very first thing is we continue curriculum review committees. Since I came 5 years ago, we have annual review committees that have been set up in literacy and math and health and PE and technology and more, so that there's a cycle that we go through. This year we have the elementary math committee, which is reconvening because the teachers at the elementary level would like to explore other options besides investigations. The program is 8 years old, so that committee will be making recommendations by the end of the year. District-wide technology is going to be looking at the standards for curriculum. If the PARCC test is mandated by the state, then we need to change what the skill expectation is, particularly in our elementary schools, because the students have to be able to use toolboxes and more, and we want them to feel very comfortable using the technology. In addition, as we've increased the technology in the district, we're finding our students are mastering skills at a far more rapid pace than we anticipated. So we'd like to articulate those and have them outlined for the district. Social studies met last year. They're continuing this year to articulate the curriculum, and then they'll be looking at supplies and materials. PE and health are looking at stress reduction and yoga. They've also looked at the curriculum last year and continue this year. And literacy's been ongoing as we continue to expand in trying to help all children learn to read and write and excel at high levels. We also are benchmarking students. We've been using AimsWeb to get formative data on how students are doing. With the formative data, we're going to be able to cluster them better so that we can meet students at the level they're at and raise expectations for their learning. We're doing administrative training on data analysis so that we know what we're looking at, we know how to interpret the MCAS as well as our internal tools. We'll also be applying for a statement of interest for the middle school with the MSBA this year. I think that everyone knows the middle schools are in pretty deplorable condition, and the school committee is ready to move forward and bring that to the town as well as the MSBA. Reader's Workshop was introduced several years ago. It's continued to be implemented last year and will continue this year. The Writer's Workshop will also be introduced at the middle school and elementary schools this year. We're excited that we now are in partnership with the Teachers Association on online learning. The high school is going to unroll Chinese, and Tom's going to talk a little bit about that, Landers, during his high school presentation. We're also mandated by the state to come up with a new educator evaluation tool. We've been working on that the past 2 years. The union needs to meet to ratify the agreement that's been made between administrators and teachers and the union president. And once that's in place, we'll have a new tool that will be rolled out hopefully by the end of this month. We're also developing special programs. We have a committee of parents. I think we had 27 parents come to a meeting last week to look at programs where we can do more forums for parents around helping their students be successful in everything that they do. And then we're looking at ongoing ELL training for teachers. It's mandated by the state. The teachers have to take a 40-hour course. One of the problems is the state has mandated that for the past 2 years, but there are not enough sections for our teachers to even sign up, never mind find the 40 hours to take the course. Okay, at this point, I'd like to invite all the principals to come up, administrators, and join us on stage. I'm going to pass the microphone off to Tom Landers, who is our new high school principal. I'm very excited to be here tonight, I can tell. And as they come up, let me introduce them. Neil Guile, Wolf Swamp Elementary School. Donna Hutton, Center Elementary School. Marie Pratt, Blueberry Elementary School. Tom Landers, High School. Nicole Allen, Glenbrook Middle School. Chris Collins, Williams Middle School. Susan, you already met, and Mark Oldenburg, our new Director of Pupil Services. Tom, it's all yours.
Good evening. There's lots going on at Long Meadow High School, lots of impressive things. This certainly does not capture all of them, but quickly, Marie touched on expanded online learning opportunities. Just this week, we've reached an agreement and an interesting and unique opportunity for our students. The 3 languages taught at Long Meadow High School are French, Latin, and Spanish. Those are robust, successful programs, but there is a unique opportunity to study Chinese, Mandarin in particular, and we've looked at that over the last 2 years. It's difficult to find a brick and mortar teacher of Chinese. There's also not a great demand for Chinese at Long Meadow High School, so we're trying to think outside the box. And we're looking at different online opportunities. Not all online learning is created equal, so with the help of our World Language Department and the department chair in particular, we have formed a relationship with Middlebury College, world and nationally renowned college for world languages. So beginning next week, students will be able to take an online Chinese course through Middlebury College, taught by an online teacher and with a liaison here at Long Meadow High School. So we're excited about that. It's a pilot program, and more information will be coming out about that, but we're certainly excited about that. Really, as it relates to what Marie spoke about in terms of the Common Core and PARCC, I would simply reiterate what was said already. They are related, but they're separate. So the Common Core in Massachusetts is a done deal. We married the ELA and the math standards in 2011, and since then, in 12-13, 13-14, in this school year, we've been working to integrate that and expose that to the students. If MCAS stays, we're certainly ready for that. We do very well on MCAS, and if PARC comes, and if the state tells us that that's the direction we're going, we want our students to be prepared. So really in English and in math, the department chairs have been focusing on preparing students for MCAS and preparing for the possibility of PARC. And they do that through looking at practice questions, potential questions. To be fair, Pearson, who has created the test, has thrown various potential questions our way. And the potential questions that we looked at in math, for instance, in the 2012-2013 school year are different than the ones we looked at last year, and they continue to be revised. But they're looking at those. As a matter of fact, the math department yesterday during their professional development time looked at MCAS particular problems, and they looked at how LHS students did, and they analyzed that data. And next department meeting of math in less than 2 weeks, they're going to look at a particular Algebra 1 PARC problem that all LHS students have worked on, and they're going to analyze that and break that down. That's the type of work that's going on at LHS. Marie touched on it. The real difference in terms of PARC to MCAS when it comes to math is rigor and pacing. When I sit with the math teachers and the math department chair, what they say is parts of algebra, what used to be Algebra 2 are now pushed down to Algebra 1 in geometry, parts of pre-calculus are pushed down to Algebra 2, and parts of Algebra 1 are pushed down to pre-algebra and 8th grade math. It is more rigorous. And part of our job here tonight is to educate and answer questions, and I don't want to hide from that especially in the high school math area, that is an area where it is our job to be concerned and therefore to be proactive, and that's what's going on at Longmeadow High School, and we're preparing our students. In the realm of ELA, the real difference between PARC and MCAS has to do with a greater emphasis on nonfiction. So even though there is no history or social studies, MCAS or PARC, they have decided to embed historical texts into the ELA PARC potential questions and into the ELA standards that changed and were updated in 2011. And the other aspect about ELA and the difference is really research. So although there was a lot of research going on at LHS pre-new standards, all social studies students and all ELA students in every class, every course, and every level is engaging in research. Those are the main differences, again, in ELA and math. Science, there will be no difference. No matter what happens in the state of Massachusetts, there has been a decision announced, according to Department of Ed, that we will stay with MCAS regarding science. And in addition to that, we certainly wanted to mention other positive things going on at Longmeadow High School, and those include an expansion of our life skills program. We brought home to Longmeadow High School Longmeadow students who have severe disabilities but can and should and finally are part of our school. We look at that as a great thing. They have become an integral part of our school. We have a fantastic set of teachers led by Kate Mard, and we're in our second year of that. And we went from 9 students to 11 students this year. That's expanding, and that's something that we're proud of, and that you can find out more about in days and months to come. That's something that, although it doesn't have to do directly with test scores, it has to do with things, concepts and values that are important to us here at Longmeadow High School. And lastly, I would say that we would love to bring more technology, more access to technology to the students of Longmeadow High School. We acknowledge that technology in and of itself does not make good teaching, but the marriage of good teaching with technology is what we're aiming for. So we have increased our capacity of devices, Chromebooks and MacBook Pros and iPads, and we're up to approximately 2 devices for every LHS student, which is great. Having said that, in the spirit of not banning technology, but integrating it and regulating it, which has been a history of Long Meadow High School since I've been here for the last 10 years. We have embraced a BYOD policy, bring your own device. Students absolutely do not have to bring their own device. For most students, their device is a mobile phone, to be fair, but they certainly could bring a laptop, they could bring a tablet, and we are friendly to that. We regulate it, we tell them where they can use it, how they can use it. It's got to be educationally appropriate. It's certainly easier to outright ban it, but that's easier is not necessarily better. So we've embraced that, our faculty has embraced that. And again, to clarify, no student needs to bring his or her own device. They certainly will not be held, they will not be treated negatively in any way, shape, or form. And usually it's being used for research when students are engaged in independent learning, or for quick research, quick lookup of information from a teacher across the board, from science to social studies to English, et cetera. So those are some things that are going on at Long Meadow High School. I certainly will answer any particular questions if you have them about Park, but those are some of the many things that are going on at Long Meadow High School. We're proud. We hope that you're impressed with what we're trying to do with your students.
Good evening. Mr. Landers, wonderful job. I would agree. I mean, I think Tom did a great job of laying out how Common Core is impacting us sort of at the teacher-kid level. I think it is more rigorous. I think the pace has increased. It actually caused us to change a little bit of the way we offer math at the middle level, especially in grades 7 and 8. But really nice job kind of laying that out, Tom. One of the major changes at the middle level in Long Meadow this year is that Glenbrook Middle School across town and Williams Middle School where I am, for the first time since I've been here, we aligned our schedules so that they're identical. We always had similar schedules because we share staff. One of the things that we've changed this year is our schedules are identical. We put a schedule team together last spring from both staff from both schools, and over the course of about 10 meetings, we really hammered out a schedule that for the most part is working really well for both schools right now. And it does allow us to really offer exactly the same thing to all of our kids, because all of our kids from both middle schools do funnel into one high school here. And it also just keeps the consistency that we're trying to build across all that we're offering to the two populations at both middle schools. Another real change in the spring, we've always had classroom libraries at the elementary level, but until this past spring, we never had classroom libraries at the middle level. School committee was kind enough to support a fairly significant purchase in the spring, and we brought classroom libraries to all of our ELA classrooms, grades 6, 7, and 8. And it's introduced a whole level of kind of reading at the middle level with choice reading. Certainly we've always asked students to read kind of common novels across all of our ELA classes and in our social studies classes. But this has brought in choice reading and a real variety of genres across all of our all of our ELA classrooms. And it's really, even in the first 6 weeks of school this year, we are really becoming kind of a culture of readers, more so than in the 7 years that I've been here. And it's really incredible to see, to walk into classrooms and see kids really getting excited about their own reading, because they have choice in it now. It seems like a simple thing, but it's something that at the middle level we hadn't incorporated until this fall. So it's been a really great change, and we're getting kids, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids excited about reading again. So that's been really great to see. And what ties right into that is we're really implementing this reader's notebook model, where kids are really reading much more intentionally, really being taught how to break down text. And again, that goes back to some of what Tom was sharing about how we need our kids to be even more prepared than ever, especially with the nonfiction text. So our classrooms, I get an opportunity on a given day to go through 5 or 6 or 7 ELA classrooms all in a row, and to see the continuity and consistency of the way that we're teaching reading, really explicitly teaching reading. It seems that at the middle level, why are we still teaching reading? These kids should have mastered all these skills. The content gets so much more, the content in other subjects, science, social studies, content is so much more difficult for kids that they really do need explicit instruction on how to break down that text. And we're doing a great job with it. We've changed our whole professional development model. We rolled out a PD model this fall, our first 2 days back to school in August, where there was a lot of choice involved for staff, but all really related to how we respond to our kids' needs. And there's been a lot of buy-in, there's been real passion about PD again, and it's been great to see. And we're seeing it play out in the classrooms. We have new literacy specialists at both middle schools, one at each building, one at Glenbrook, one at Williams. And these specialists over the course of this year, what they will do is they will work with our kids that are kind of below grade level. Down below, we talk about a universal screening tool. What we use here in Long Meadow is a tool called AIMSweb. And we do a benchmark. In September, we've just finished the benchmark and loaded all that data into the system. And really, that gives us kind of tiers of kids. The vast majority of our kids are at grade level, but we have some kids that are really accelerated, and we have some kids that are below grade level. And so what we do is that with them is we progress monitor them. And our literacy specialists, one in each building, are now taking on that kind of tier 2 model. We've always had really good tier 1 instruction in the classroom, and we've always had kind of that tier 3 intervention with kids that are on ed plans, but we haven't always had a great literacy model in tier 2. We've had a math lab in both buildings, both middle schools, for several years, but we haven't had kind of that literacy piece to complement it. Those positions were added in the spring, and again, those are off to a really great start. Again, only 6 weeks in, but we really love what we're seeing. Connected to that is up here what is called the RTI/WIN blocks. Those blocks are blocks during the day where we've started out kind of taking the kids that are in those tier 2 and tier 3 from our benchmark in AIMSweb and making sure that we're addressing where their deficiencies are. The next step is going to be to bring challenge into those kids that are on the upper end of those benchmarks, so that not only are they getting differentiation in their tier 1 classroom, but we're really pushing them with challenge work that is more than just, do an extra worksheet or read a couple of extra chapters in your book. So these are the things that we've brought in, and they may seem sort of disconnected in this presentation tonight, but they are really all connected back to kind of how Common Core has made us look at how we're educating kids. So again, as Tom said, I will be happy to answer any questions later, and thank you.
Good evening. It's been an exciting and challenging time in the elementary schools, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the elementary teachers for all their hard work, dedication, and high level of collaboration that they've been engaged in over the last couple of years as we have implemented some of our new initiatives. It's interesting usually we start with elementary, then go to middle school, and then go to high school, so it was interesting to kind of do the reverse, and I think it really just highlights that the elementary is the foundation, and it's really what we do at the elementary level that then allows to the next step. So you're going to hear pretty much a lot of the same message, even when going back to Tom talking about Park, at the elementary level, we see the rigor in math is there, and then the addition of making sure that we are doing nonfiction and informational text. So over the last couple of years, the elementary teachers have been implementing a Reader's Workshop model. So we are continuing that and strengthening that, as this year we are implementing the Writer's Workshop part of that model. As Marie even mentioned, we have reconvened the elementary math committee to look at our math program. As some of you know who have elementary students, some of us are involved in piloting parts of Engage New York to look at the Common Core and how we can best teach our students math. So that committee will be working, talking with their colleagues, and making a recommendation later. As Chris mentioned, and their whole response to intervention in our WIN blocks, and we're going to have probably a presentation later this month where we'll talk a little bit more in detail about this, but it gives an opportunity in the schedule for those students who do need some remediation, students who need reinforcement, and then students who might need some enrichment. And this is new to us, and it's a great opportunity. We're still working on some of those plans, but the teachers have been really collaborating with each other to try to make that a meaningful block of time. As mentioned, we are doing the AIMSWeb testing, and the elementary level, we also do what we call the BAS, the Benchmark Assessment System, which is a little bit more of an in-depth reading assessment, so we can really understand the instructional and independent level of our readers. We've had literacy coaches in the past, but this year we have full-time literacy coaches. Unlike the literacy specialists that we've had at the elementary, the literacy coach is really helping the teachers. It's really training the teachers, improving them, going in, modeling lessons, assisting them, and strengthening their instructional practices. What's not up here on the elementary that I want to highlight, technology has been mentioned, and even just yesterday at our early release day, the elementary teachers, the library media specialists did some presentations on ebooks, and elementary parents will be hearing about that in probably a couple weeks, but that's really exciting, the technology and how we can expand kids and they can learn anywhere and have access from home that you'll be hearing about in the next couple weeks. I'd be happy to have my two colleagues answer questions since I was the one elected to come and speak up here.
So that gives you a taste of what's happening at each of the levels. Kevin Waranda, our technology director, is here, and he's being bashful and doesn't want to come to the microphone. But over the past couple of years, he's done a sensational job of really getting us up and running. Our first goal was to expand the amount of technology in classrooms so teachers had the tools that they needed. We found out last year and the year before that as the new equipment was coming in, the internet was slowing down to a pace that was as slow as could be imagined. And teachers were not able to do live video streaming. Some of the lesson plans were interrupted. Kevin joined in a partnership with Mass Broadband. Our broadband is now absolutely exceptional. He's in a partnership that's going to save the district a ton of money over the next 5 years. It'll take us 5 years to pay off, and at that point it's going to be free to us. So we want to thank Kevin for his phenomenal work, and we're really excited about what's happening in technology. I think when you see the ebooks, MyOn coming home, that students can do an interest inventory. It does the Lexile reading ability. It will earmark books that are definitely that connect to the interest inventory. So exciting things like that are happening because Kevin organized the technology and got the broadband up and running. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and answers. I know that we do have guests, and I ask that we have Long Meadow parents. Part of my goal for the night was to hear from the parents in the community, so I have a sense of what's happening in our school. So I'm asking that as Long Meadow parents come up, that you state your name and what school or schools your children are in and what grades, okay? So at this point, there's a microphone down front where we're being taped for cable TV too, so it's important that you speak into the microphone. So if you have questions, come on down, and if there's a specific administrator you'd like to address it to, feel free.
Hi, Laura Mulderick from Oxford Road in Long Meadow. My main question is about the elementary schools. There seems to be, MCAS scores came out, there seems to be some discrepancy between, obviously, the scores at the different schools. I would like to know how much priority is placed on the curriculum and how the teachers are teaching at the different schools, and how it's, what is actually being taught at each school, and how is this information being taught to the children. I know that at Blueberry, there's a thing called Core 5. I don't see that at any of the other schools. What priority is the district placing on making sure that there is even information being taught to all children?
Good question. I think each year there is discrepancy in scores. It has to do where some of our special needs programs are placed. It has to do with the group of students you have in front of you because we have small populations. We like to look at our end result, where our students end up in high school, because it's a continual journey where students are at, particularly in elementary school. The curriculum review committees are absolutely fundamental in making sure that people are talking about what they're teaching and how they're teaching it. They're sharing best practices. Right now, we're looking at the data. We actually have some consultants that are putting together what areas of the different strands of the MCAS scores students didn't do well in each of the buildings. The principals and the administrative team and I have been meeting. We've talked about this in depth. We're looking at scores. But again, that will go back to the curriculum committees where they'll say, okay, what's working? We have certain grades at each of the schools that really the scores popped and they excelled. And our question to the teachers, what happened at that grade level? What did you do differently? Was it the group of kids that you had that was a little bit different, or was it something that you did instructionally? So we have some pretty in-depth conversations, but the curriculum review is critical in making sure that best practices are happening across the district. Okay.
Good evening. I'm kind of new to the whole curriculum, but looking at other school systems and other education systems like Finland, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, they're taking the exact opposite approach. They were at the bottom rungs of the education system in the developed countries. They changed their curriculum from, for instance, for math, from 25 pages to 4 pages. They cut an hour off the school year, and they emphasized active learning and independent thinking. And all of a sudden, they became the #1 country in the world in education. It seems like we're going the opposite direction. So could you explain what the benefits are of this versus like a Finnish model?
Sure. I just happened to go to Westfield State University to hear a professor from Harvard who's from Finland doing a year's study at Harvard, and he talked about it. He said that the 3 things that the Finnish schools are doing that make their schools very successful, they do child study, where teams of teachers get together and talk about every child individually. Longmeadow's done that for years. That's not new to us. They talked about having a special education program that was extremely strong, that they met the needs of the kids that were there. They also then talked about play as being extremely important, to make sure that they have recess and they have play. The Finns did not do as well if you look at PISA in 2012. They had a good year, but they've dropped in their scores. But what the Finns also have is a more homogeneous society than we do. So when you're taking a look at some of the countries such as Finland that do well, you have to look at the total picture. Also in Finland, starting in I believe 6th grade, they track kids. You go to a vocational program or you go to a college-bound program. And definitely by high school, they're tracked differently. So you really have to look at all the bits and pieces of these systems to see what they're doing. I think in what I heard from the professor and what I've read about the Finnish schools, I agree that play is extremely important. Children need time to think and be creative. I think the foundation of American success has been that we've always been creative and we've been ingenious. The Chinese and Americans have been partnering for years, and educators going back and forth. And we've looked to see Chinese students in school at 9 o'clock at night. When the Chinese educators come here, administrators, they marvel at how our kids play, and they learn when they're playing. They're able to create. So that's something we don't want to lose. But I do think that when we're dealing with a more heterogeneous population, that our need for more time in school is somewhat warranted. I certainly don't want children going with the Asian model where they're in school for 10, 15 hours a day. But I think that you need a healthy balance between all those components.
Well, that's what the Finnish is. They're reducing the amount of school time so that they can learn outside of school and stay, curious.
And I asked the Finnish professor when he was talking about the reduction in school hours, how many parents had college degrees or doctorates. He doesn't know that, because I would be very curious to know, when you're reducing the amount of time in school, then the parents are definitely teaching their children as well. Because when you're talking about literacy skills and math skills, there has to be a foundation there. He didn't know the answer to that question, but that's something that I'd ask.
Hi, I'm Kate Pacella, and I have elementary school children. It was mentioned that in the elementary schools that you're piloting Engage New York in math. And I'm wondering which grades are piloting it, how is it determined which grades were going to pilot it, how that factors into the continued implementation of the Common Core, and what's the purpose of the pilot, what's the time frame of the pilot, and how are these kids faring, or what is the expectation these kids are going to fare that are piloting a new program as opposed to the other kids who are getting full time of the curriculum that is originally destined to be for these classrooms?
Sure. When I came 5 years ago, we had a math committee because the elementary teachers were struggling with whether to use Scott Forsman or whether to use investigations. And there are definitely disparate opinions on which program is better. We agreed at the end of the curriculum review that we would primarily use investigations, but you needed to supplement with Scott Forsman's because the basic skills are not built into those higher level programs. 2 years ago, the middle school math teachers came to us and said, with Common Core, we need new books. We can't teach because the materials we have are not aligned. And particularly if you look at the 7th and 8th grade curriculum, the math, the compacted curriculum, they've doubled what kids are doing, which Tom talked about how that fed into the high school. The elementary has continued to struggle with is investigations the right program. So there was a math committee this summer that met, comprised solely of teachers, and they asked me to come over to meet with them, which I did. They'd been doing a lot of research, and they felt that this Engage New York was something that we really should look at. That the New York Department of Education has spent millions on developing this curriculum that is aligned to the Common Core. It has lesson plans, unit studies, assessment tools, pre-assessment, post-assessment, and everything. So the teachers really wanted to try it. So we met with the principals and asked what their thoughts were. The principals agreed that we would share this information from the committee with all the teachers, and whoever wanted to try a unit could do it this fall. So it was put out to all the elementary teachers, and it was by choice, because especially with the Writers' Workshop coming in, we did not want to mandate something new. So we have several teachers at various schools that are trying it. The elementary math committee has already met. They're looking at it. They're also going to be talking about looking at other programs, looking at the Common Core, seeing what changes have to be made, because they have adjustments to make so that they make sure that the kids are ready for 6th and 7th and 8th grade math, because it's changed there as well. So that was the catalyst for looking at Engage New York. We'll have more information as the year goes on. We get feedback from teachers, and we'll have more information as the math committee comes forward with recommendations at the end of the year.
Hello. I'm Kathy Nelson, and hi. I have an 8th grader, Quinn, at Williams Middle School right now, and my older 3 children have graduated and moved on in college and work, and they've done excellent, and I give credit to everybody up here. Great at Blueberry Hill, wonderful at Williams. The high school, I can't imagine improving upon that. So I'm concerned that things are changing right before Quinn gets there. I guess my question is to Mr. Landers. We're talking a lot about how elementary is preparing them for middle school, is preparing them for high school. My question is, are you communicating with the colleges in terms of SATs? I mean, is this aligning with the SATs that are being given? And I understand that the SATs are going through a revision as well. I just want to make sure that there's not going to be a learning curve. I feel like Quinn's a guinea pig, and I'm just concerned about the next couple of years, and when he goes to take his SATs in his junior year, that he's going to be in the place that he needs to be for college. To do as well as my older 3. Like, I never had concerns before, and now I'm a little freaking out. So just, I guess I'm looking for reassurance.
So are some teachers, to be candid. I would agree that Long Meadow High School and Long Meadow Public Schools all do a great job. Marie Pratt said it, Marie Doyle said it, it's a continuation of K through 12. And I agree with you that I feel lucky every day to work at Long Meadow High School. It's my 10th year. It is an amazing school in an amazing district. So we want to maintain that. Our goal is to maintain that. We are here tonight speaking candidly to inform and educate, not to sell you on anything. This decision is going to be made by the state of Massachusetts. If you feel strongly one way or the other, contact your representatives. That's the most direct and honest answer I can give. If I was going to answer, does this align with the SATs, you're right, the SATs are going through some changes and some adaptations, but the SATs and the ACTs and the AP exams all measure different things. And as Marie indicated before, they're all separate indicators, and they all indicate that Long Meadow students, Long Meadow High School students are very impressive. The Long Meadow High School transcript speaks volumes to colleges and universities when our students apply there. We don't want to do anything except strengthen that. I don't know if the state of Massachusetts is going to adopt PARCC. We have adopted the Common Core in ELA and math, and we've made that adjustment. We'll continue to make that adjustment. If MCAS stays, we will do fine. If PARCC comes, we will do fine. The Department of Education and the other states have readied districts and states to say if you go to PARCC, there will be a learning curve. There absolutely will be. Having said that, we are very confident that Longmeadow students, Longmeadow High School students, will be at the top of the heap. We will outpace the other districts. We will do everything we have to do to make sure that our students are ready and prepared. That's our goal. That's what we're committed to. Does that answer? Yes, it did. Thank you.
I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that our teachers are so involved in everything that's going on. They've been fantastic on keeping up. They communicate with the principals who communicate with me, but they're very cognizant of a lot of the changes that are coming, and they're making sure that we're in line so that the kids aren't surprised by any changes in the tests.
Hi there, I'm Chip McKelney, and I homeschool my children. A good reason why is because of the Common Core. Our kids were at Wolf Swamp School. I can't say enough again about Mr. Guile and the teachers there. I believe Longmeadow hires some of the best people, no doubt about it, but I don't trust the system. I'd like to thank you for tapping the brakes on PARCC for next year. I think that was a good move, you and the school committee. Buy us a little time. I think this was all implemented awfully quickly. Between when the final draft of Common Core came out and the Department of Education in Massachusetts adopted it was 49 days. I don't know how the public has time to vet it in 49 days at the beginning of summer. It was June 2nd to July, whatever the math is. Forgive me, I didn't take Common Core math. So I disagree that it was well vetted. Was anybody here asked about their input on Common Core, or does anybody know anybody that was asked about input on Common Core? Anybody at all? I know I wasn't. And you talked about how well Massachusetts is doing. And Longmeadow is one of the best districts in Massachusetts. Why weren't we involved? I'd like to ask. Nobody here, unfortunately, nobody's here to answer that question.
I was asked about Common Core.
Okay, well, that's one. I've spoken to 4 teachers, 2 within Longmeadow, 2 outside of Longmeadow about Common Core. One was like, don't get me started. One teacher in Longmeadow said, I don't have a problem with it. 2 teachers outside of Longmeadow cut their career short specifically because of Common Core. One of them said Common Core makes good teachers feel like bad teachers. So I am very skeptical. And I'd like to hear your best explanation why, if Massachusetts is doing so well, why did we choose to take Common Core, especially for math? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you can answer that, because you didn't make that decision, I know. So.
I taught middle school math, and when I taught 6th grade middle school math in Belmont, the parents were always concerned because it was repetitious and the kids were bored. And it was the curriculum, and as the state frameworks and the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics came out, they pushed for more math. I think the Common Core is a result to challenge our top kids. We are worried that in 7th and 8th grade, it could be way too rigorous, the amount of material they have to cover, and it's really meant it for kids that are really at the top of the game mathematically and ready with all a strong foundation. I think with Common Core, the fact that it was based on the frameworks gave me confidence, because a lot of it are things that we've been doing since the 1990s. I do think that we have to be careful with the number of initiatives, and we have to be careful to support our teachers, because I think that particularly at elementary, there's an awful lot happening. I think that we hear from our elementary teachers that there's a lot happening, and we have to pace that and be careful that we're supporting them in what they're doing. I think some of the changes have been good, but I think that we have the flexibility to control that. I'm not hearing from the principals that there were major changes made in terms of what the Common Core dictated, but what our curriculum committees are saying what we have to do. I don't feel feel that we've been dominated by the Common Core. I think those changes came in, we saw what the difference was when our frameworks. I think, you know, Tom's talking about alignment to Park is a concern because we have to restructure how we do some of those courses. But as I said, the middle school's already done that, so.
Okay. Are you familiar with James Milgram at all? He was on the validation committee for the Common Core.
I'm not.
He was the only mathematician on the validation committee. It was 29 members, and he refused to sign off on it, the only mathematician. He did say that the Common Core standards would be an improvement for a lot of states. Massachusetts and California and a couple other states he mentioned that it would not be good for. So I'd urge people to look
In terms of
at-
rigor?
I don't like that term. Not appropriate, I guess. Rigor in the wrong direction is, I'm not interested in. That's what I feel I feel like we're getting rigor in the wrong direction. So
If you look at the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, they've been ahead of this movement. They've been doing standards since the 1980s, and they were very well represented on the math committee. And it was Massachusetts teachers in particular that had quite a voice on it. So he may have been the only college mathematician or someone by profession, but there are definitely plenty of math teachers on that committee.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Brett Lukasik. I have two twins in third grade at Center School. And we moved here because of the education system, and we've been quite happy with it. But in third grade, we started with this Common Core math. And I have to say, as somebody with an engineering background, I appreciate where it's going. There's a lot of really interesting things that they're doing right now. They're going into algebra, and basic stuff. It seems to be pretty well thought out, but I've just found that I've had my wife is a doctor, I'm an engineer, and I find the thing extremely difficult to slog through. There's no backup. There's just nothing I've got there. I got a piece of paper and that's it, and the poor kids are screaming at me. And I find that I think we're turning our kids off to math at the time when they really need to be turned on to math. And a couple other things. I noticed teaching history, there seems to be like a very direct structure to that Common Core, whereas George Washington isn't really touched upon, and a lot of bad things in our society have been touched on for third graders, for crying out loud. I don't quite understand that. I understand that they need an equal look at things, and they need to understand the bad parts in our history, but not at second grade, for crying out loud. The other thing is, a little concerned, having twins in the same class, the same grade, I see the different ways they develop. And I find concentrating math very hard, in pre-algebra and everything else, can be really off-putting to children that aren't really ready for it. I don't think their brains are really ready for this stuff. And then other ones, like my little daughter, just zips through. But there has to be some kind of consideration in each one of these grades, particularly in elementary school, to tailor it to each child, and I don't really find that. And I'm also a little concerned because we've got all these plans for weaker students, which I respect, but I don't see a lot of plans for the stronger students, for the people who are really going to do things in their, who need challenges, let's put it that way. So I guess that's it.
Okay, where to begin? The math is always a challenge, and I think developmentally kids do get it at different times. I think that's part of the teacher's frustration with investigations. Some find that the problem solving is good. Some find that the way the problems are worded with the program are not helpful, they're confusing. We have parents tell us that they can't help their children because of the way investigations is taught. So I think the fact that it's 8 years old and that the math committee said this summer we need to look at it again, we've called this committee together before we've even called other committees. I share your concern because I'm not hearing from a group of teachers, we love this and we have the perfect program for our kids. So that's something that we definitely have to explore. I think with the wind blocks, they're new. You're going to be hearing a lot about them over the next several months. We're in a trial period right now. We're 6 weeks into school, but we're very cognizant that we have kids that need to be challenged, and that's a conversation I have with the principals weekly. Where are we at? How is it going with grouping kids? What are we doing with the kids that are at the top? So that's something that we're developing curriculum and looking at. I know that it's hard, we're in the midst of the change, but that is definitely on our radar screen. What else am I missing? As for the social studies, we can have a talk about that at administrative team and delve into maybe what's happening there. I'll learn more about that, okay? Okay.
Hi, my name is Lee Vanko, and I have 3 children over at Blueberry Hill. And I wanted to ask about what this gentleman just mentioned about the math program. I know we're talking about how we've had investigations and now what we're trying to do is Engage New York, but I am seeing the same problems with Engage New York homework. My first grader came home the other night with homework that I did with her, and 75% of it came back wrong. My third grader had a couple of math problems last week come home. I actually posted them on Facebook trying to get help with them, and I got at least 40 comments, and you should have seen the variety of answers and the variety of comments about what is this, what is this doing for our children? Now, I'm not against a new approach in math. My frustration is, first of all, like this gentleman said, some of the requests require way more critical thinking than our children can give. I mean, one of the questions my third grader got was, explain how the number 7 can have different values. Well, I had no idea what that meant. So I actually Googled it to find out what it meant. Well, once I Googled it, I understood what it meant. But in the meantime, neither me nor my third grade child understood what it meant. Mm-hmm. My biggest fear is that if those kind of questions come up on tests, she's not going to have an idea how to do them. And she's a good mathematician. She knows how to do math. But these questions, it's the way they're asked and the lack of instruction given and the fact that we don't have textbooks to look at. We just, as this gentleman mentioned, had a piece of paper. So what I want to know is what, as parents, can we be given as tools to help our children so we can not only just try to answer this question for tonight, but help them going forward and help them prepare for the tests that they're eventually going to be given.
We will bring this information back to the math committee. Keep in mind, we did not say we're adopting Engage New York. We're looking at it. It was at the teacher's request that we tried.
But how long are they going to do it for? That's my concern. They're doing it now.
They're piloting it. They're trying out a unit to get the feedback that you're giving us. It's not clear. It's not in the proper order, et cetera, et cetera. So they're trying it. Whenever we try a new program, teachers always pilot different series and different editions. But the questions that you raised, Sue will bring back to the committee. Feel free.
So all the teachers at Blueberry did volunteer to pilot Engage New York, and we are doing the first unit. Some, when they first looked at it, were like, yes, we want to do this the whole year. Now, as they're doing it as well, they are like, okay, we might need to rethink this. So we are talking about this constantly as far as what is going to be the next step. I also, though, will say a positive. Some of the lessons that they have done, they were like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can do this. And then, some of you who are from Blueberry, number bonds, I'm sure you didn't know what a number bond was. And so they have seen some progress, and they really have seen some of the kids really understand some of it. But we are looking at that. We are evaluating after this first unit. I do know that some will be going back to Investigation Scott Forsman. I did want to make a comment. Somebody asked this question. It was a Blueberry parent. So as far as the math, we have the standards we need to teach. So regardless of what program we are using, we all have the same standards. So.
Can I just ask, though, I'm really trying to get to the heart of the student situation, the student problem, and that being like what this gentleman said before about our kids crying over their homework. I understand we're testing it, we might change it, I get that, but in the meantime, how can we help them? Can we get the teachers to put stuff on their websites to show us how to help them? That's what I want to know as a parent, because I feel helpless right now.
We're working on homework guidelines right now, but my advice to every parent in the room, if your child's crying and doesn't get it, stop. Send a note to the teacher and say, this was too frustrating. You have two issues, because one of the major pushes in education right now is resiliency, that we let kids give up too early. But you also know when your child's tried hard enough, you don't get it, they don't get it, stop. That's just an endless and futile exercise. And send a note to the teachers. Because I think at that point, the teacher needs to know they tried, you tried too, and that's it. Sometimes they are poorly worded. But having taught math, having been on review committees in Belmont, Foxborough, Newton, Carlisle, and here, math always, no matter what program we use, it seems like the elementary programs are just so frustrating. And we're running into this again. But we'll bring that back to the elementary committee, and they will look at what's ever out there. This is not a given. This is something the teachers thought was good for us to look at. But if we find out there are too many problems, it doesn't mean that that's the solution.
Okay, thank you. That's more helpful. I'll start writing those notes. But then actually, I do have one more question, sorry. To piggyback on what Laura Mulderrick had asked about earlier, she was asking kind of about how the curriculum is unfolding in the different elementary schools. And one of the examples I want to bring up, and maybe it's just so black and white to bring this up, but it's something that keeps festering in my head, and I really need to ask about it instead of complaining about it. We're talking about science, we're talking about STEM. I know we had our meeting last week about the fifth graders, and a lot of the parents were disappointed that they're not getting as much science as they had gotten in previous years. That being said, one of the things that we had brought up at Blueberry was that the teachers had mentioned that the kids aren't getting lab time. That being said, over at Center School, my daughter has a friend in the fifth grade, and in her life science class, they're making a field trip to a local pond to apply life science learning. So that's one of those things I think a lot of us are struggling with. Like, how do they have time to go do a lab science, at a pond, and our kids can't even do lab in a classroom? Why is that happening, and what are we doing to address that?
We had a good parent meeting last week, you were there, and we're talking about that, because I think some people look at the schedule, and I have an elementary teachers advisory committee that I meet with monthly, and they said that some teachers look at the schedule and think they should be following it exactly, literally as it is, while others say that there's flexibility. If you're going to do a lab or an experiment, the first graders in one of the schools, they were doing a unit on butterflies. They read up on it, they were out releasing butterflies, they studied the cycles. So we just need to help the teachers understand they have flexibility with this. This does not mean it's 5 days a week, we're locked into that. There has to be give and take. And I think also we need to communicate a little better about how science and social studies is embedded in the literacy, because I think part of the training last year with the company we used was a focus on nonfiction and more literature, whereas if you're looking at Readers and Writers Workshop, it's more than literature. It's about embedding content area and doing some problem solving. So we do realize that we have some teachers that are feeling locked in, but we're trying to get that message out that this is not what you're locked into every day. There is flexibility.
Hi, my name is Anya Griffith, and I have 3 kids. I have 2 at Blueberry, and I have 1 at Williams. I don't have any comments about Williams yet because it's early, but I wanted to briefly comment on my fourth grader who is doing Engage New York. And I guess I have a question and then a comment. My question is, it appears that some of the worksheets that are coming home are Engage New York. So, for example, my son has 3 worksheets a night in math. It only looks like one of them is Engage New York, and the rest of them are not. Maybe they're just not branded Engage New York. But at least in his experience, he's having fun with it. I know it's weird. Maybe it's just a 4th grade, maybe he's ready for it. And he's not the kind of kid who voluntarily does math worksheets. So he seems to be having a good experience. And I don't know if it's because of the teacher that he has, who is able to incorporate Common Core, but then make it interesting, or whether it's all Engage New York. The other comment about Engage New York that I wanted to make is that, specifically for 4th grade, is that there's a lot more we could be doing if we're really, if we really intend to proceed with Engage New York. There are teachers in the Syracuse School District, actually. I had to Google this because I had to help them with one of the worksheets. The Syracuse School District publishes a guide to parents with answers. I actually found the exact answer, and was able to reverse engineer it to teach it to my son. So Syracuse itself has everything online. There's also a teacher in California, somewhere in the valley, where she actually publishes a guide for parents specifically. So when they're covering a unit, she puts everything online, answers to everything, so that parents can help with the homework.
Great.
And are not frustrated. So that's something that can be done and should be done if we're going to do whether it's Common Core or anything else. I think it's really helpful to parents, because we do struggle and we spend an inordinate amount of time, times 3, helping our children with homework. I do want to go back to first grade. I have a first grader who's young, who he just turned 6. I was kind of dismayed to learn that there's no more recess. There's only recess after lunch. He's a 6-year-old boy. He cannot go for 45 minutes for math, 45 minutes for English, 45 minutes for whatever else they're doing. I've looked at his schedule. There are no built-in breaks except for lunch and recess. It's upsetting. It doesn't make any sense why that would be, other than convenience and efficiency. And those should not be the words used for first graders. He comes home. You had made a comment, I think, about the Belmont School District school system, where you taught about math being repetitious and kids were bored. I don't know if it was Belmont or, I'm sorry?
In 6th grade.
6th grade. Well, my first grader comes home with lots and lots of homework, well above the 10 to 20 minutes that's advised by any an educational organization. He has worksheets, math worksheets, back and front. I don't know if they're engaged in
I'm going to interrupt you because we're getting into personal issues. This is my advice always to parents. Those issues are principal and school council issues.
I get what you're saying. No, I understand. I was on school council last year. I'm
Overall,
sorry.
we will talk about this as a team, but I think you're bringing up really good points that are definitely worth bringing to the principal, school council, and PTO.
I understand. Well, I was the co-president of the PTO last year. I was on school council last year as well. So all these issues are not new. None of them have been addressed. My point is that my first grader, and I had a first grader at Blueberry before, is all of a sudden coming home, same teacher, coming home with worksheet after worksheet after worksheet, and they are boring. I mean, I have to say. So if he's using Engage New York in first grade, which I don't know, it's quite different from the experience in 4th grade. So I would absolutely take a look at what's happening at the lower grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade.
It's the point of the math review committee.
Yeah.
So that we have input from all schools, all teachers, all grade levels.
I just want to make a quick comment about Common Core, because, that's a sore subject, but from what I understand, what has been published, the Common Core began top down. So first they determined, what does it mean to be college ready and employment ready? And then they said, okay, in 12th grade, that's what you need to have to be ready. So what does that mean for 11th grade? And it went down. So they pushed down these standards instead of starting in kindergarten saying, what is developmentally appropriate for a kindergartner? And and go on from there. They went down. And so I just feel, looking at what my kids are learning and looking at the materials, they're overwhelmed and anxious. Not my 4th grader, but my first grader is, and other kids are as well. So that's just my comment, is that Common Core is not, the cure-all. It needs to be re-examined, and we need to be conscious as a school system as to what we're doing mentally to our children.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Mulderig, 3 Oxford Road. We have 4 boys in the district, 5th grader, 1st grader, and 2 kindergartners. We attend center school. And so I guess, and kind of fueled some of my concerns was just hearing this woman articulate what her first grader is doing. And I guess fundamentally what I'm seeing and what we're seeing is you're saying that there's curriculum meetings within the elementary schools, but it's clear based on the actual execution of the curriculums that there's a distinct discrepancy across the 3 elementary schools. And I just think that that's fundamentally unfair. We're all residents of Longmeadow, and we all pay the same taxes, and it's clear that our children are receiving a very distinct and different level of education. I'll give a couple examples. I think the math program that's being piloted at Blueberry sounds interesting. It sounds like it's a reaction to some needs, and these kinds of things have to happen. There was a term used before, the kids are guinea pigs. I don't think that's always a great term, but that's what's being used here. And I get some group has to be the first folks to do that to see if it works. I guess my concern is if it becomes something that's viewed as valuable and advances that group, only the Blueberry Hill fifth graders will reap that benefit. My son at Center, the other kids at Wolf Swamp will now be behind those kids when we enter middle school. And middle school becomes a difficult task to catch up. And I think the discrepancy across the curriculum is clearly seen. We have Center School ranking in the bottom 25th percentile in the 4th grade last year, now the 5th grade for math. I looked at the last 6 years of data. Longmeadow has never had any specific class rank that low. They were in the 25th percentile, the top 25th percentile last year, so something happened. And I appreciate that you folks are not going to solve the Common Core problem. That is a political issue. But I think because of the focus on the Common Core and the preparation for the Common Core and all the things that you've had to do as administrators to get ready for the Common Core, clearly, I don't know if there's confusion in the teacher ranks. What do we teach? What are we teaching for MCAS? Are we teaching the core fundamentals? Is there differentiation? But that is a really concerning sign to us as parents, not only of our own son who tested fine, but for that group. And then when they go to middle school, now we're having a huge discrepancy. We have their peers in Blueberry learning or piloting a different program. Why didn't we sink or swim together across the 5th grade? I really do feel that that's fundamentally unfair for the other 150 kids in that grade. Next year they could be distinctly different. I came up to talk about that group, but in terms of curriculum equality across the 3 schools, I forgot the woman's name, but she was talking about her 1st grader and all the homework he's doing. My 1st grader is doing no homework at Center School. So we have another clear discrepancy within what's happening. Now, I think his 1st grade teacher is wonderful. My older son had him, and she's got a tremendous reputation. But I guess my feedback to you folks is I don't know what's going on in your curriculum committee meetings, but I think there's clearly not enough communication happening because something is broken. We're having a different level of education based on what elementary school you are attending. Thank you.
It's a complex question because every group of students is different, and there are cohorts, and because there are small numbers of kids that take the MCAS at each of the elementary schools, the schools fluctuate. We are delighted to bring more special needs students back to the district. We've saved $500,000. On top of that, we're creating programs, but that is going to have some impact.
I don't think special needs students equate to a 60% drop in advanced and proficient from one year to the next. The makeup of the class didn't change that dramatically. Something happened. I don't want to focus on that specific class issue. I'm more focused around the fact that we have inequality within the curriculums within the elementary school. You're saying you have committees to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's happening, and now you're piloting a math program for one group of 5th graders who tested very well, and we've got another group who's not getting it. So if that program turns into something that's very valuable and you guys adopted it, that's great. That'll help benefit my other 3 kids, but my son who's in 5th grade will now be behind. He will enter 6th grade and he will be behind. And I just think that you, as the folks who are in charge of setting those things, you need to be considering this. Because it's just fundamentally an unfair situation, in my opinion.
And if Engage New York doesn't work, then the Blueberry kids will be at a disadvantage. Teacher input into curriculum is a high priority because they are the people that actually
You just made my point, Superintendent, because that's the whole point. Why aren't all of them doing it together? Because then if it fails, then you can work them together next year to get them where they need to be.
Because the teachers all did not want to do it. They had input, they chose to do it separately. The committee is looking at this so that they can't come out with consistency. The standards are the same at every single school. The expectation for what those kids should know and do by the end of the year is the same at every single school. How it's taught and what program they use is in the discretion of the teacher. But the standards are the same. There should not be different expectations for your children than there are at Blueberry, than there are at Wolf Swamp. Could that be the last question? Okay.
Sorry, this one's actually more to the point. So there was a lot of talk about in the high school level about there being a lot of nonfiction reading, and I know the standards at large pretty much, place a lot of value on nonfiction reading. But is there still going to be fictional reading in our children's curriculum?
Absolutely. We were doing practically no nonfiction reading, and whenever you looked at assessments from the MCAS or looked at what we were using primarily fiction. We still will always use fiction, but nonfiction also prepares students for real-life learning. Chris Collins talked a little bit about the ability to read in science and social studies, and that comes from being able to read nonfiction in the low grades, particularly primary sources. So. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming. I think that we got a lot of information that the team can take back and certainly have good discussions about. We'll bring your concerns about the math back to the Math Review Committee to see what we can do to make sure that the kids are getting the best that they can this year as we look at what changes we need to make to offer them the best education possible. I do encourage you to keep in communication with your school councils and PTOs too, because a lot happens at that level as well. Keep us informed of what's happening, and hopefully we'll see a lot of great things happening. We do have an exceptional school district, and I want to leave it on that note. We can always get better, and we pride ourselves on continuous improvement. I think every administrator on the stage really cares. We don't like to hear that any child is struggling, and we will do whatever it takes to help every one of your children succeed. Thank you, and have a great night.